All right, now that we've finished bags A and B, which got our differentials complete, we're going to be working on the front gearbox. So we need our front differential here that has the 7,000 weight oil, and then we need to start ripping into bag C. All right, so first things first here, step C1. Looks like the objective here is to put the pinion gear and the drive shaft coupler onto the gearbox. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take our two bearings, one on the inside here and one on the outside. So we'll put one on the inside, and that will push and snap in. One on the outside, probably the same thing, push and snap in. All right, now we're going to take our pinion gear, and it doesn't appear that this gets greased, similar to what the outdrives on the differentials did. So we have our pinion gear on the inside. We make sure that spins and that's pushed all the way through. Now we have a shim that goes on the shaft on the outside of the gearbox here. And now we put our drive shaft coupler onto the pinion gear shaft. So what we need to do here is put this on. Now there's I don't know how well you can see it, there's a flat spot right here on the shaft. And you need to make sure that that set screw is going to sit down on the flat spot on that shaft. There's only one way it can go on there correctly. So we're going to throw that on, and then we are going to use thread lock for the first time in our build. So our set screw is going to be using a 2.5 millimeter hex. So we'll put that on there. We'll grab a little bit of thread lock. I'm not sure how it's going to come out of here. Whoop. Maybe that's a little more than I need, but that's all right. So of course, making sure we're on that flat spot. Whoops. On metal, so I'm not going to be super light with it. I will wipe off the excess thread lock here. It's not going to hurt anything we use that much, but I'll try to use a little bit less going forward, and make sure that spins, and it does. Now it's on to step 2, and that is putting the differential into the gearbox. Now it comes with these two shims, and the manual very clearly states these may not be needed. With our coupler facing away from us, the way that this is supposed to go in is the ring gear. You were looking at it on the left. And I don't think we're going to need any of these shims. These shims are optional if you have any side-to-side play. That feels pretty good, but let's put one shim on. And that goes over the outdrive on the ring gear side. And it sits on that bearing, it looks like. So let's see if that still fits in there with that shim. And it fits in there with the one shim, so now let's try to put it in there with the other shim as well and see if we need two shims. Because we know for sure we need one. This might throw you off a little bit because these shims don't sit flush. They're very they move around. So that might throw you off a bit. It's throwing me off a little bit. Yeah, I got no side-to-side play there, so looks like one shim it is. Make sure everything spins freely. The pinion and the ring gears are meshing, and that's beautiful. That's what we love to see. So now we need to take some black grease and put it on our ring gear. It doesn't really say how much we need, so we're going to put some on, spin the gears around, and see what it looks like. Let that get spread around in there. Probably get some more. Maybe a little more, make sure we have even coverage. So now we need to go ahead and put what looks like the cover on here. Make sure we do this the right way, and it can only go on one way. So it looks like this is going to be secured by 2 cap head screws, and there's only one size of these in the bag, so you can't really screw this part up. And I want to make sure everything fits correctly. All right, got a little snap there. Now, when I'm pushing everything together, I want to make sure everything's still spinning. I want to make sure that the cap on the gearbox isn't going to bind anything up. All right, and then we're going to take our screw gun, and of course being careful because we are going plastic to plastic. And then of course we're going to tighten by hand. These are 2.5 millimeter. And of course we're not going to over tighten. Like I said, this is plastic to plastic. And what I want to do throughout kind of everything that's when we have parts that are rotating, I want to make sure everything continues to spin freely. Everything is still spinning freely. All right, so that's step C2. Now step C3, now we're getting somewhere here, everybody. We are going to be putting on the front shock tower. So it can go on either way. It's the same on both sides. So it looks like we have 4 of the same cap head screws we just used to put the cover on. And it's going to go on just like that. All right, and just like everything else, we got those 4 screws in for the shock tower, and now we hand tighten. All right, here's our gearbox with our front shock tower. Making sure everything still spins, of course. Everything does. All right, now the last thing we need to do here is install our shock standoffs. And of course, being careful, we put them on the right side of the shock tower. So they are going to be facing the front. It looks like it wants us to put the standoffs in the middle hole of the shock tower, as far as I can tell. And double checking the back of the manual or the setup sheet, we can see for sure that it wants the shock standoffs in the middle hole, and we're building this to whatever the manual says setup-wise. And it's supposed to be a pretty good baseline out of the box, so that's what we're going to do. Now, these shock standoffs go on the front, and they are secured by a button head screw behind it. So I'm going to get a little thread lock here because now we are going metal to metal again. All right, 2.5 millimeter driver. All right, and then I'm going to go back in with a turnbuckle wrench because that should be good to hold on to the standoff while I tighten on the other side. So I will go ahead and get the other screw on here. All right, so with both of them on, I'm going to grab a turnbuckle wrench. So it looks like the 5 millimeter turnbuckle wrench is perfect for this. So I'll give that a nice snug down. And we should have done this before we put the shock tower on so that we could stand this thing up. But all we need to do now is put on the bottom cover here. And it looks like this goes on a specific way. So it looks like where you kind of see some notches and stuff here. It looks like this is going to go towards the front. And it kind of slots in a very certain way there, and you'll be able to see that. And you do have to kind of push it down and it will snap in. So now we're going to use these teeny tiny flathead screws. And these are a 1.5 millimeter screw. And we are just going to put this down, and we are going to be very careful not to over tighten. So we are not going to use our driver. And in the manual, it does explicitly state, do not over tighten this. You do not need much. All right, we got our bottom cover on. And now one more time, we're going to make sure everything spins freely, nothing's binding. Make sure it all feels smooth. Double check that our grease has good coverage in there. That feels great. Shock standoffs look good. That is bag C. We got our front gearbox, shock tower, and shock standoffs installed. All right, now it's time to move on to bag D, which is essentially the same as bag C, except we're adding a wing mount and what I believe is a body mount as well. All right, just like before, bearing, pinion gear goes in, It spins. We take the small shim included in the bag. We put that over the pinion shaft. All right, we take this drive shaft end, or whatever they call it. They call it a drive shaft, but it doesn't look like much of a shaft. So just like before, we're going to make sure that the hole that is in here lines up with the flat spot on this shaft. We're going to put some thread lock on our set screw. Give it a little snug. Just wipe off any excess that shows up. And like everything else we've been doing when we have spinning things, we make sure it spins and it doesn't pull off. That's all good to go. All right, now step D2. It goes in basically the same exact way as the front. There really isn't that much different from the front to the rear. I think we are using one shim front and one shim rear. I got no side-to-side movement when it's put in here. Let me double check. All right, so we are good there. Make sure everything's meshing with your pinion. Do some spinning. Some spinny spin spin, that's all good. And then just like before, we are going to take our black grease and put it on the ring gear. I'm going to take a little bit and go kind of the whole way around this time. All right, and I'm happy with that. And now we move on to putting on the cover with our flathead screws. And like before, it kind of snaps in a little bit, and then once we do that, we'll just hold it, make sure everything is still spinning as we need. But, of course, we are still going to take our 2.5mm driver and finish tightening by hand. And after doing so, of course, make sure everything spins. You don't feel anything binding up. That all seems great. So now it wants us to set the diff off to the side here for a second. And I'm going to leave it on the paper towel just to make sure I'm not getting grease anywhere. And now what it wants us to do is put on our shock standoffs, our wing mount, and our body mount. So same thing as the front tower. This can go on either way. It doesn't matter which way it faces. This wants us to use, let me check the setup sheet in the back. So in stock configuration, it wants us to use the middle hole. On the front, there's only 3 holes. In the back, there are 5 different holes. So we're going to make sure we are using the middle hole. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in through the shock tower. And then I'm going to put on the thread lock. I'll start with this one. All right. We got our thread lock on both screws. I'm going to slot those on by hand here. All right, and like we did before, we were going to use our 5mm turnbuckle wrench. To tighten the shock standoffs onto the shock tower. Grab our 2.5mm hand driver. Give that a good snug. Just a very slight ugga-dugga. All right, we got our shock standoffs good to go. Now let's go ahead and get the wing mount on. Now, per the manual, it shows the stock configuration is at the highest point. So you'll see the green dots in the manual there to signify which holes you will be using. Now, the way that this mounts, it appears, is using, so it looks like it's using 4 cap head screws and 4 M3 lock nuts. All right, so now we're going to get our wing mount. Now, by the manual, it'll show the green dots for where the stock configuration is. So we got our standoffs here, and we need to make sure the wing mount is going on the same side. So what we're going to do is we are going to slot our 4 cap head screws here in through the wing mount. It's a little tricky to do, but you'll figure it out. So we are going to take our lock nuts that secure the wing mount and try to at least get them threaded to start. Then we'll go back to them all and tighten. Now what we need is a nut driver. And I did buy some ProTech nut drivers here before the project started because I didn't really have any nut drivers. So looks like 5.5 millimeter for the nuts. Rear shock tower, standoffs, wing mount, that's all good to go. Now we need to put on our body mount, it looks like. And it appears that that is going to be secured through two little holes on the back of the shock tower here. And of course our body mount is going to be in the front, and it's going to go right in between those nuts we just installed. I'll say the coating on those lock nuts is very poor. Just in my ProTech nut drivers, that has completely come off, which is fine. That is not a big deal. So I'm going to get my body mount here, and that is going on with more of these cap head screws, it looks like. Lots of these cap head screws. So no mistaking what you need whenever you rebuild this thing. I'm going to put one screw in here and try to get this started. I'm going to use my screw gun, and this is going to be a 2.5 millimeter. It's the same cap head screws we've been using this whole time. No problem. It's really nice here under the wing mount. It's probably pretty hard to see, but there is a little notch in here to make sure that that cap head screw for the body mount, you'll have no problem with that. Wing mount, shock standoffs, body mount complete, and now we put it onto the rear gearbox. And of course it's important to make sure that we do this correctly. I believe this probably has a different shape on the top of the gearbox to allow the body mount to sit on there in a nice flush manner. Shock tower gets installed onto the gearbox with the cap head screws. Alright, and of course we hand tighten. And that is our completed Bag D rear gearbox, shock tower body mount, and wing mount.